2, 1.
Well, hello, everybody. This is Bishop Joseph Warren Walker III. I'm the pastor of the Mount Zion Church here in Nashville, Tennessee.
And I'm Mike Glenn. I'm the senior pastor of Brentwood Baptist Church, and we want to welcome you to our conversation today.
Absolutely.
Now, you and I became friends about a year or so ago when I started doing some research on who was really doing it very well as a pastor in social media. That led me to you. You are kind of a social media ninja here. And that started our conversation.
Yeah.
He was teaching me, kind of coaching me up on how he makes it work for his ministry. From that started our friendship,
Right.
which now has become brotherhood.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it has deepened a lot and has opened up some conversations from our different perspectives when we started addressing the issue of racial reconciliation. Now, we know this is a hot topic, but Bishop and I both firmly believe that the church has to be part of this conversation if it's going to make a difference. And so our friendship has deepened to the point that we've been really honest and kind of blunt with each other. You have certainly taught me a lot about an African American experience in Middle Tennessee and the nation. And I want to capture some of that.
Yeah.
But before we do, let's make sure we understand what we're talking about.
Yeah.
When we say racism and racist.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't know of anybody who would admit to being a racist.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
But we know it is a problem.
Sure.
So how would I know if I'm a racist?
I think you're a racist if you show prejudice toward a particular group of people from the perspective that you are somewhat superior.
Okay.
You view yourself from a superior perspective, you look down upon them, and then you have a certain level of bias toward them, which again could affect a lot of different areas. If you have power in particularly political arena, policies could be affected because of that bias.
Mm-hmm.
If you are an educator, you could teach from a certain slant. If you're a business owner, you could, treat a particular demographic one particular way. And so often when you are expressing a level of bias from a perspective that you are superior and this person is inferior, then you obviously are dealing with some racist issues.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anytime I would look at a person, and let's just pick the usual topic. A young African American male in the hoodie.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
I would look at that person and make assumptions about who he is.
Right. Based on predisposed
experience. Based on
yeah.
what I assume is going to be true about everybody.
Absolutely.
Who's an African American in the hoodie.
Absolutely.
And that's racist.
That's racist.
Okay.
Right.
So anytime I would make a decision without knowing the person.
Right.
Is racist.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think often, when we look at this idea of being racist and then racism, racism is more systemic, right? Because to be a racist means that you are blatantly, you can be blatantly ignorant of the fact that you are doing racist things. You could be in a club and you can say something, calling a person boy who's a grown man, demeaning a person, or saying, oh, here they come, let's go, feeling somewhat uncomfortable around people who are other than you. Those are racist, tendencies. Racism, however, is when you can, again, impact the way you preach or teach, the way you legislate law, policies. Those things systemically can inevitably affect culture in a way where you can marginalize people based on your perceptions of them, which could be erroneous perceptions.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, one of the interesting things that's happened in our church is that you came and talked to our staff about being black in Nashville.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that was I don't want to say devastating, but our staff talked about that a lot.
Yeah.
Some of the stories you shared with us, and
Sure.
that kind of stuff, which led us to kind of understand more what you would call the incipient I mean, it's in the air we breathe.
Yeah.
It's in all the systems we have.
Sure.
So explain that a little bit to us.
Yeah, I think being an African American in Nashville or any city in America, I think you experience a certain level of bias, and I think to live in the skin, I always say it's hard to fellowship if you don't spend time in my ship. So I took your staff on this journey, explaining, just in Brentwood, time and time, I've been pulled over for no apparent reason, just being driving while black, or I've been in other cities, you get pulled over driving while black, and people say, does that really happen? Well, it does happen. If you're in a nice vehicle, it's a certain time of night, you start getting questions like, what are you doing here? Where do you live? Those are the kind of questions. So there's a certain anxiety, right?
Right.
That comes when I get pulled over, my heart palpitates. I'm thinking about life and death. You get pulled over, you're thinking about,
it's going to cost me some money.
Yeah, it'll cost me some money.
Yeah.
Right. So it may cost you money. You're thinking about how much money it's going to cost you.
Right.
I'm thinking about, could it cost me my life? Because of this, I don't know what's approaching me. I don't know, if you have this person who has this particular bias toward African Americans who may assume I could be dressed like this.
Right.
I could be coming from the gym with my hoodie on. I pastor a church, a leader in this community. This officer may not recognize who I am, right? But what about the guy who's not me, who's just living where I live, who has a hoodie on, coming down the street at 5 o'clock in the morning on the way to the gym? And he gets pulled over, and it's like, what are you doing? Why are you here? Those things are scary, and so I think that, bias training is very important for people to understand. I don't really think either, man. I'm gonna be honest. I think we make the mistake that I think it's unfair to say all people who are not black or Hispanic are racist. I think we have a lot of people who are just uninformed. And I think that, and you can be prejudiced and not racist.
Right.
Yeah, you understand, because you can be a black person who's prejudiced, but it's hard to be, racist when you're black because you have to be in a position of power. You understand? But I think that it's very important to really have conversations, to explain to people that being black is not monolithic. We're not all the same. You understand? Like, all white folks are not the same. All Hispanics are not the same. I think a part of diversity is for us to really have conversations and learn each other like we've done. Like, we got together, and it's just like, man, we're like, brothers from another mother. It's like, and people would never imagine the depth of that friendship. We talk, we laugh, we make jokes against each other, and we're not offended by it, because I know it's coming, the place where it's coming from. You understand, and but I think that's an intentionality.
Right.
You have to be intentional about forging those kinds of relationships, and I think when we are willing to get outside of the silo that we're in and step outside of those spaces and really take a moment and get to know someone, outside, you realize, wow, this is an amazing story. It's an amazing story tied to that, because there are systemic issues. You take a kid who grew up in a community, a digital divide. He doesn't have a computer. He grew up around drug-infested communities. His father's in jail. His mother's working 2 jobs. That kid has to go to school. Now the teacher's not just teaching him. The teacher's a social worker. That kid is dealing with a whole set of variables that a lot of other kids don't have to deal with. Right? So for that kid to just achieve.
Hungry.
Hungry. Yeah, on top of that. So that kid's dealing with a variety of different issues. That kid's not being dropped off, didn't leave, the nanny who just cooked a nice pancake breakfast for him. That kid is coming from and that kid is thinking, man, I got to go back through that same community. I got to pass a liquor store. I got to pass a crack house. I got to pass, the pimp. I got to pass all this to get home. And the other kid has to pass the soccer field, the cross field, the nice YMCA, all that to get home. And so the perspective is different. So how can
on one side of the street, the problem is there's too much to do. That the child is so booked, and so preoccupied that he literally doesn't have time to be a child.
Right.
And on the other side of the street, it's a whole different set of questions, which continues on in this child's life. Right. They go to an inferior school.
Right.
They graduate an inferior high school.
Right.
Have a difficult time getting into college, if college is even an option.
Right.
Have a difficult time getting a job.
Right.
So what happens to a young man who, my dad took me in the living room and taught me how to shake hands, when I stand up, how I say somebody's name. he had my mother come in so I would learn how to address a woman.
Yeah.
I mean, we spent a whole afternoon one
Yeah.
Saturday learning how to shake hands. Well,
Yeah.
I got my work ethic and that kind of training from my dad.
Yeah.
So what happens to the young African American man who doesn't have that, and he shows up for a job interview?
Exactly. He doesn't have that skill set unless there's a mentor in his life, unless he has a father like me, But for the most part, if his father's incarcerated, if his perspective is skewed, take that kid. Here's where it really gets interesting, Mike. Take that kid. That kid makes a bad decision based on his upbringing. And we all have to be responsible for our decisions. No excuses there. Put that kid before a judge, right? And that kid is viewed as this horrible act that he's done, and now this kid has to live the rest of his life now in a cycle of dysfunction because the society in which he lives has not informed him, nor has it embraced him, nor has it given him a chance, because he has already started so far behind the eight ball that it's hard for him to catch up, right?
Well, he's a problem to be solved, not a child with a future to be embraced.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
No, absolutely right.
Okay.
Absolutely
how are we gonna
right.
fix this kid rather than, well, here's something I'm gonna pour my life into because he has a future.
Yeah.
She has a future.
Yeah. And I'm convinced, Mike, that you take any of us. See, the young man doesn't steal because he's necessarily a criminal.
Mm-hmm.
He steals because he's hungry.
Mm-hmm.
You take anybody, and they have nothing to eat, nothing, and don't know where it's going to come from.
Right.
He's trying to survive. This guy's in jail. I see them. I go visit the prisons. Most of the African American men are in jail for drugs. They're trying to make a living. Now, it's wrong.
Right.
And there's no justification for it. But they're out there trying to make a living because the system that they live in is difficult. Now, of course, we could say, well, they should go to school and get education. But again, we're talking about the disparity here. We're talking about what that looks like for most African American men growing up, having to pass the liquor store, pass the crack house, fathers in jail, poor school, poor books, no resources, right? Nothing to do, no after school program.
Right.
His influence, his world is, this is the way out.
Mm-hmm.
He does that, right? So it becomes kind of this thing of, wow, you think about, there's this big problem, drugs in America, right? Let's lock all these kids up. Then you come back and you say, okay, that's criminalized. It's called a drug problem.
Right.
And then on the other side, you have opioid crisis, right?
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't necessarily affect the African American community, but affects the other community.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's called a health crisis. You get the difference?
Yeah. Oh, sure. Sure.
Same thing, but it's called health crisis because it's coming from a different perspective.
Right.
Right. I think anything that, and you and I both know, anything that that prevents a child from having a normal life sends a child down a deviant path and must be treated as such and must be dealt with from a spiritual, psychological, sociological perspective. And I think what we have to do is really look at the intersectionality of all these things comprehensively, and you just can't look at it one way, or you criminalize a person, you demonize a person, when in fact there's a lot of restorative justice that needs to take place. There's a lot of conversation needs to take place to understand that if we're really going to be who we need to be in our community, take the whole thing into consideration.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. You and I are friends. What and this conversation is coming out of the conversations you've had, where you and I have had over coffee.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So let me give you a free shot. It's important for a white person to know what?
It's important for a white person to know that there is no manual to understand black people. You can't just go. You just can't go and say Black People 101. You can't do it. You're not. We're too diverse. You got Bishop Walker. You got Oprah. You got Jay-Z. You got the person leading a wonderful school in Nashville right now, Purpose Academy,
Mm-hmm.
young lady who's doing an incredible job. This school you probably never heard of, where Lagra Newman, look up Lagra Newman, Purpose Academy, who's doing this job with these kids, right? And every class is a university. These kids are like preschool.
Wow.
Every class is a university, from Harvard to Alabama. You like the Alabama,
Yeah,
LSU. And these kids sing the fight song, and they all chart above average in terms of their grading and reading.
Yeah.
It's an amazing,
Mm-hmm.
but nobody knows about it. Nobody really knows about it. It's happening right there in Nashville, in the heart of the city. And these kids wear uniforms. They're articulate. They're learning. And Lagra's doing it. On the big thing, you have Lagra Newman, and then you have, Jarrell Casey, who people see on the football field, but who's doing incredible things in the community. He and his wife, just incredible, different. I mean, you have people doing some extraordinary things. But you have to not just think it's just one way of understanding us.
Okay.
It's a lot of different ways. So what would you say to African American people in terms of what would you want us to know? What
that we don't get hip hop.
Come on, you don't get hip hop.
No, we don't get hip hop.
Come on, man. Come on.
No, we don't get hip hop. I think what we would want is, yes, we feel bad, but so many times we made us feel like it's our fault.
Your fault, right? Yeah. And it's not.
I've done my family back as far as I can. We didn't own slaves. We were poor white trailer trash.
Yeah.
And I realized that was part of my culture. I mean, I grew up in Alabama in the late 60s, early 70s. Yeah. Sam Cunningham didn't integrate Alabama until 70, 71 when USC came.
Mm-hmm.
I have never met Sam Cunningham, but I don't like him because he ran all over Alabama in Legion Field. And literally, that's how Bear Bryant got African Americans, and that was just the 70s.
Yeah.
We see the sign Black Lives Matter. Does that mean white lives
don't matter?
Don't matter.
Mm-hmm.
And I've come to the place in my own journey that, okay, it may not be my fault, but still, as a child of God, as a follower of Christ, it is my responsibility that there are, and we want to celebrate the diversity because there is something about the diversity that makes God known in a way that one of us or even one type of us cannot do that by themselves.
Sure.
So to have the different voices and the different perspectives, I think, is all key.
Yeah.
But what I would want to say to the white community is, hey, it may not be your fault, but it's still our responsibility.
Yeah.
Because we have children of great potential and great abilities who are literally growing up within blocks of here.
Yeah.
And not having a chance.
Yeah.
And that's, we are not the land of guarantees.
Yeah.
But we are the land of opportunity.
Yeah.
And for a child to literally not have that opportunity is just, I think, something we'll be held accountable for.
Two things that I'd say. One is, and I mean it sincerely. One of the things that I'm so impressed by with you, with Brentwood Baptist Church and amazing folks in this congregation, is there's such a genuineness to get it right. I mean, I think that, to have a leader like you who is really pushing this needle forward, and I had a chance to just interact and meet some of your staff and some of your team who's volunteered with us on our outreach day. Mm-hmm. You have some amazing people who have great hearts, and I think they really want to do the right thing. And I think that my second point in that is that I'll say to African Americans, nothing's going to ever get done if we have a posture of us against them.
Right.
This is not about drawing the line in the sand and making it us against them. This is about us saying, how can we learn from each other? Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? I learned so much from you. And I think that's the reciprocity of the relationship. We learn from each other, and there's a lot of growth that I have to do in learning. And I think you have to get to a point where you can't blame this current person for
Right.
the atrocities that happened 3 and 4 generations in their family line.
Right,
You
yeah,
can't do that. It's just not a fair
Mm-hmm.
thing to do. And it's also a point of taking personal responsibility for your own, destiny as well. I
Right.
teach this in our church. Like, you can't sit back and just wait for the world to drop something in your lap because, oh, woe is me. You have to be willing, particularly when you're given opportunities,
Right.
to really take advantage of those opportunities and do
Yeah.
well with those and not exploit them. So I think that there's a great opportunity in this community for us to really encourage each other, help each other.
Mm-hmm.
But what I see happening between Mount Zion and Brentwood, I think is such an organic thing. And I
Yeah.
think, as you said, and we both said, if this is going to happen, it's not going to happen in Washington.
No.
It's going to happen because the church takes the lead on it,
Yeah.
right?
And holds the culture accountable.
Absolutely, absolutely. I want to take some questions on Periscope, and I've got my Periscope right here. So if you have some questions for Pastor Mike or myself, please shoot them to us. We've got about 10 minutes left, and we just wanted to catch you on your lunch break for 30 minutes. And if you have some questions for us, we're here to answer them, and we love to do that.
Yeah.
And he answers all the tough ones. And
Yeah.
you send me all the light ones, all right? Yes.
What would you say to one of your church members about, okay, here's the first step that I want you to take in dealing with racial reconciliation?
I think the first step is, I think, to be okay acknowledging or to do a good job of articulating context versus just being angry.
Mm-hmm.
Because often we react versus respond. I think that the best way is to be able to clearly explain to people in a way that I think is, you can have a very cordial conversation, as we do.
Yeah. And
to put it in context.
This is why I feel what I
This
feel.
is why I feel. Because one thing to say, I feel a certain way, but why?
Right.
Where does it come from?
Mm-hmm.
I get to tears when I talk about it.
Right.
When I really go, and then because if a person doesn't really understand the depth of where it comes from, they'll look at it like an isolated event. Well, I'm sorry it happened to you, but probably something.
That was inconvenient.
Yeah. But if you understand the callous, the years that this has been built up inside of you and what you've had to deal with,
Well, you told the story when you were talking to our staff about how you measure your pace coming out of like Green Hills Mall.
Yes, Lord.
If you get too close to a white female.
Yeah.
That you will measure your pace because
I don't want her to feel threatened.
You will startle her.
Yeah.
Man, that killed me.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, you have to think, I'm an African American man coming out of Green Hills Mall at dusk. Nobody else is in the garage but me and her. She's, nervous because she sees an African American male. In her mind, and not generally, but you can see it sometimes, her biases kick in. Oh, God, what's about to happen?
Mm-hmm.
So you try to slow down just so you don't startle her. Or you try to make eye contact to say, hey, how are you? Bless you, or something like that. But, the feeling of that, like, I'm just going to go the other way. I don't want to even create this scenario, God forbid if she screams, I don't, But I mean, it's just one of those things a lot of African American men deal with, and it's difficult.
But you just learned that's just part of the.
That's a part of what you do. It's a part of. It's a part.
adaptation.
It's a part of that. It's a part of living as an African American in this culture. Someone raised a question: what role does social protests have in racial reconciliation?
Protesting is a great American tradition, and we live in a country where you are free to express your grievances in through civil disobedience. My thing with protest is I always want to protest with a plan. Okay, I always want to say, hey, we're bringing this to your attention. Here's what needs to be addressed, and here's how we are addressing it. One of my frustrations with Colin Kaepernick is he knelt, brought great attention to the moment, had something significant to bring attention to, but then had no plan. So as opposed to many of the Titan players we know who are doing great community work who have a plan. So I always want the protest to be it's not enough just to get mad. And anger can be used as great energy. But I'd always want to connect that to a workable plan.
Okay, very good, very good. All right. I'll take a few more questions here if you have them. That was very good question. Actually, that was a very good question. Someone said, but Kaepernick did have a plan, or he does have a plan. So
Well, he may now,
yeah.
but the first time he was interviewed,
yes. Oh yeah, I understand.
he didn't connect it to it.
Here's a good.
And I think a lot of the momentum was lost out of that.
Here's a good question. Our communities are largely divided by the church being one of the most divided places in America.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that in large part, I think again, the historical, place of how we worship,
and how a lot of the churches started.
Yeah.
You know,
out of racism.
The slaves went to church over here. Developed their own community.
Yeah.
And the pastor of that church became a significant member of the community because he represented everybody in that church. And so that's because the African American community couldn't find community support, encouragement, power anywhere else.
Sure.
Then it located in the church. You know, the civil rights movement came out of the church.
Sure. Yeah, then Howard Thurman said the most segregated hour in America is 11 o'clock on Sunday morning, right? And I think to be able to look at ways, one of the things we're trying to do is try to solve that problem. I think one of the things that's really a kind of, not disheartening, but I think kind of a cosmetic fix is what we call, multicultural.
Right.
It's not really multicultural.
No,
it's just cosmetic, right?
No,
it looks like on the surface, these people are worshiping together, but behind the scenes, there's no sharing of power. There's no sharing of ideas.
And there's no sharing of story.
Exactly.
This is why I'm at worship, because this is what God's done in my life. This is why you're coming to worship with that. I think, the joint worship services that we've got coming up, the joint mission work, community services we're doing. The hardest thing in the world is going to a church where you don't know anybody.
Yeah, it's tough.
That's tough even when you're the pastor.
Yeah.
When you walk in and don't know anybody. So I think as our communities get to know each other, that being part of each other's congregations and celebrating at key moments is going to be easier.
I think so. Listen, we want to thank y'all so much as we get ready to wrap this up. I know these topics have been, for many of you, very heated, and some of you watching some of your comments, I know you've been really like, whoa, want to get in there. And that's why we've done this. Yeah. We want to really strike a nerve with you to let you know that this is not something that we consider a sprint, but it's a marathon. And we're very committed to moving this forward to bring about a great level of dialogue using the platforms that God has given to us so you can communicate with us and we communicate with each other to hopefully bring about a sense of awareness. We're not here as instructors to you. We're here as students as well.
Fellow pilgrims,
and we're learning and we understand your comments and we just want you to know that, this is not a time for us to, to put out, very derogatory things, or this is not a political, posturing. This is about two faith leaders who believe the power of God is able to help us come to a place of true reconciliation. And I just really appreciate this opportunity. On the Mondays in February, we're going to be sharing at the same time. And I just think it's going to be amazing.
I do too. Now, here's your homework. If you are a Caucasian, then you be intentional about finding an African-American friend and listen to their story. Don't talk. Don't wait to talk. Listen to their story. If you're African-American, then find you a Caucasian friend and listen to their story. Don't talk. Don't wait to talk. The beginning of the friendship is always in listening. And I'll tell you, just from me, having this guy as my friend has made my life so much richer and so much better. And I do, man. I brag everybody.
Man, I feel the same way. And I feel that way about all of you. Thank all of you, wherever you're watching. We hope you've been inspired. We hope that something has been said to cause you, even on your lunch break, sitting in wherever you're sitting now, to just go over and just say, hey, how are you? And meet someone. And I think that's how we get better. So let's close in prayer.
That's right. We'll do it.
All right. Lord, we thank you for this day. Thank you for allowing us to have this moment together. Thank you for what you're doing in the life of the Brentwood Church and Mount Zion Church, churches everywhere who are committed to bringing about reconciliation. And during this Black History Month, we thank you for allowing us this platform to be a blessing to your people. Bless each person who has watched and those who will watch later. And we thank you for what you're going to do. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
Thank y'all.
Thank you.